The night air cut into my skin like 1,000 needles as my father shoved me out of the front door and into the snow. I was barefoot still in my thin sweater and jeans, the freezing ground searing against my feet. His voice thundered behind me, each word slicing deep. "If you will not give us the money for your sister's wedding, then get out and freeze." I stumbled on the icy steps, catching myself against the railing, my breath spilling out in sharp clouds. My hands shook not only from the cold, but from the disbelief that this was happening. This was not the first time my father had punished me with cruelty, but never had he pushed me so far. The slam of the door echoed like a final verdict. I was locked out. The snow swirled around me relentless, while the warmth of the house glowed through the curtains I could not reach. My chest tightened as I pounded on the door. "Dad, please!" I cried, my knuckles raw from the wooden frame. The sound of the television came faintly from inside, laughter from Melissa's favorite show, as if nothing had happened. My mother's silhouette passed across the living room window, but she did not open the door. I pressed my forehead against the glass, the cold burning my skin. "Mom, please." Nothing. My teeth chattered, and I sank to the step, pulling my knees into my chest. A cruel memory rushed back a birthday years ago when he forced me to sit outside in the rain for refusing to give Melissa my allowance. That had lasted an hour. This felt different. This felt final. My mind raced. The money. $15,000 saved from 2 years of working night shifts at the diner. Money meant for nursing school for my escape. He wanted it for Melissa's flowers and a designer dress. And because I said no, I was out here in the snow. I thought of Melissa upstairs in her warm room, probably smiling, probably pleased that Dad had chosen her side again. My lips trembled as I whispered, "He chose her over me. Again." My skin stung, the wind biting every inch. I looked around the world silent except for the crunch of snow beneath passing tires. I waved, but no one stopped. The shame was unbearable. How could I explain to anyone that my father had locked me out of my own home for refusing to fund my sister's wedding? It sounded too cruel to be real. I pulled my arms tighter around me, the cold spreading like fire through my veins. For a moment, I wanted to give up, to lie down and let the snow swallow me. But then anger sparked beneath the fear. I was 20 years old. I was not a child to be tossed away. My father thought he could crush me into obedience. He thought the cold would break me. Instead, the cold woke something in me. My breaths grew heavier, the tears on my cheeks turning to ice. My voice rose a whisper at first, then a declaration into the night. "I will not give you my future. You will not take it from me." My fists clenched, numb but steady. I staggered to my feet, my body shaking but my mind sharpening. If I survived this night, I swore it would be the last time he ever held power over me. I looked at the locked door at the house where laughter and light hid poison and cruelty. Then I looked out at the endless white road, uncertain but open. My heart pounded with terror and defiance. That night, abandoned in the snow by my own blood, I did not know how, but I knew this everything was about to change. To understand why that night in the snow carried such weight, you need to know who we were, or at least who we pretended to be. On the outside, the Andersons looked like a respectable suburban family. Our home was painted in warm earth tones, the lawn carefully trimmed by my father every Saturday, the porch light always glowing to welcome guests. To neighbors, we were the picture of stability. A father with steady work, a mother who volunteered at the church, 2 daughters stepping into adulthood. But behind the front door, the truth was darker. My father, Thomas Anderson, ruled the house with an iron voice. He was a man who believed respect was demanded, not earned. He had been in construction management for years and carried himself like he built not only buildings, but destinies. To him, Melissa, my older sister, was a crown jewel. She was 4 years older than me, graceful, admired, praised for every little achievement. To him, she could do no wrong. And then there was me, Rachel, 20 years old, the invisible one. I was the one who kept my head down, worked shifts at the diner, saved every penny for my nursing degree. I learned quickly that asking for fairness meant punishment. My mother Linda tried at times to soften his edges, but over the years she became a shadow whispering that I should just go along with things, that resistance only made things worse. In her quiet way, she was loyal to his authority, not to me. My earliest memory of this imbalance was at age 8 when Melissa tore my science project in half the night before school. I cried to my father, expecting comfort. Instead, he told me, "Stop complaining, your sister works harder than you, help her with her project instead." That set the pattern. Every injustice was excused, every cruelty brushed aside. By the time Melissa was in high school, she was already treated like a princess taken to salons gifted jewelry, while I wore secondhand clothes and counted coins to buy notebooks. When Melissa announced her engagement to Bradley Collins, the household transformed into a shrine to her upcoming wedding. Bradley came from a good family, not wealthy but solid, and to my father this marriage meant status, respect, proof that Melissa's life was unfolding perfectly. My father poured himself into the preparations, insisting that the wedding must be extravagant. When bills stacked up, his gaze turned to me. $15,000 I had saved for my education became his target. He spoke as if it was obvious, as if I owed it to the family, as if my dream could be sacrificed for flowers, gowns, and champagne. I refused, and that refusal cracked the mask he wore for the neighborhood. It was not the first time I had resisted him, but this time the stakes were higher. I had been holding on to that money as my ticket out, a chance to build a future beyond the shadow of his control. He saw it as defiance. Melissa fed his rage, whispering that I was selfish, that I wanted her to suffer, that I was jealous. Bradley stayed polite, distant, but I could see the unease in his eyes when family arguments spilled into dinner. Still, he said nothing. My mother only repeated her refrain. "Rachel, just give them the money, it will keep the peace." But there was no peace to keep. There was only obedience or punishment. To them, I was not Rachel, a daughter with her own path. I was a resource to be used. And yet, even as I describe them this way, you need to understand the complexity. My father was not a monster to the outside world. He coached Little League, shook hands at the hardware store, and neighbors admired his discipline. My mother baked cookies for church fundraisers, smiled softly in the pews. Melissa posted glamorous photos online, a perfect bride-to-be. The world saw one version. I lived another. That is why the night in the snow mattered so much. It was not just about being locked out. It was the culmination of years of silence, years of being treated as less. It was the moment when appearances cracked. I was no longer willing to play the invisible role. I was Rachel Anderson, and though they tried to bury me under guilt and cold, something inside me refused to die there. That night was not an isolated cruelty. It was the loudest chapter in a long book of favoritism, control, and erasure. And standing in that snow, shivering but alive, I realized the truth. I would either keep bowing to their version of family, or I would carve my own. That choice was coming fast, and the battle lines were drawn within our own home. The demand came on a Sunday evening, the kind of evening when the house smelled of roast chicken, and Melissa was glowing with bridal magazines spread across the dining table. My father sat at the head papers and bills in front of him like battle plans, his eyes fixed on me as if I were already guilty. "Rachel, you will give $15,000 to cover the wedding costs." It was not a question, it was a sentence. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. "That is my tuition," I said quietly. He slammed his palm against the table, rattling the glasses. "Tuition can wait. Your sister's wedding cannot." Melissa tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Rachel, do you not want me to have the day I deserve? You are my sister. This is family." The words dripped with manipulation. My chest tightened as I glanced at my mother. She looked down at her plate, silent, as if the pattern on her fork was suddenly fascinating. I tried again, my voice firmer. "I worked 2 years for that money. It is mine." His face hardened, a vein pulsing at his temple. "You live in my house. You follow my rules. Family comes before selfish dreams." The word selfish stabbed me. I turned to Melissa. "You have Dad and Mom paying for most of it already. Why should I lose everything I saved?" Her eyes narrowed, her lips curling. "Because I deserve it more than you ever will." The sentence hung in the air like poison. My stomach twisted. My father rose slowly, pushing back his chair, the room silent except for the scrape of wood against tile. He walked around the table until he loomed over me. When I refused to look away, his hand came fast across my face, not enough to knock me down, but enough to sting enough to remind me of the imbalance of power. "You will not shame this family," he said, his voice low and heavy. "You will give the money or you will regret it." Tears burned in my eyes, but I forced myself not to cry. Crying only fueled him. I pressed my lips together, whispering, "No!" Melissa gasped theatrically. "Mom, did you hear that she is ruining everything?" My mother's hands trembled on her lap. "Just do it, Rachel," she murmured. "Do not make things worse." My father grabbed my arm and yanked me from my chair, dragging me toward the front door. I stumbled, my knee hitting the wall, but he did not stop. "You will learn what defiance costs," he growled. Melissa's voice followed sharp and triumphant. "Maybe a night outside will change her mind." The door flew open, the winter wind slamming into me like a wall. My father shoved me forward, my body jolting as my bare feet hit the porch. My shoes were hurled after me, clattering down the steps. The door slammed shut. The lock clicked, and I was left staring at the wood that separated me from warmth, from supposed family. Snowflakes stung my face as I gasped for breath, my skin already aching. I banged on the door, pleading, but silence answered. Through the window, I saw Melissa smirking, whispering to Mom. My father turned his back and returned to his seat at the head of the table. It was as if I did not exist. I pressed my palm to the glass, whispering, "Please," but my mother only looked away. In that moment, the truth cut deeper than the cold. I was not just excluded from dinner, I was exiled from the family's idea of love. My value was conditional, my future negotiable, and when I refused to surrender it, I was cast out. That was the cruel act that broke the illusion. I stumbled down the steps, snow biting my skin, and realized something that terrified and liberated me at once. If I stayed, I would lose myself completely. If I left, I had a chance, however small, to survive on my own terms. The cold was merciless, wrapping itself around me like an enemy determined to break me down. My toes burned and then turned numb, my hands shaking uncontrollably as I stumbled down the driveway. The snow was thick, crunching beneath each step, the world silent except for the wind that howled as if mocking me. I looked back at the house, the warm light glowing from the window shadows of my family moving inside as though nothing had happened. I pressed my arms tighter around my chest, a bitter realization crawling into me. They could laugh and eat and plan Melissa's wedding while I froze outside. I thought of all the times I had been silenced before. The birthday when Melissa shoved my cake off the table and my father told me to stop being dramatic. The science fair when she ripped my project and he told me to help her instead. The night before prom when she took my dress and wore it herself while my mother whispered it looks better on her anyway. Years of being the shadow, the spare, the one who was expected to endure. And now this night was the ultimate proof. I was expendable to them. The snowflakes blurred my vision, mixing with tears that stung my frozen cheeks. My teeth chattered so hard it hurt my breath shallow as I crouched under the porch for a moment, trying to shield myself from the wind. I whispered to myself like a prayer. They will not win. They will not end me here. But my body betrayed me, trembling so hard I felt I might collapse. I stood again, legs stiff, and started walking down the street, the world a blur of white. Each step felt heavier, as though the snow wanted to swallow me whole. My mind screamed with panic. Where could I go? Who could I call? My phone was inside on the table where I left it during dinner. My father knew that. He wanted me powerless. My throat tightened as I realized how deliberate it was. He had not just thrown me out. He had calculated this. The humiliation, the helplessness, the cold, he wanted me broken enough to hand over the money. I stumbled past houses lit with Christmas decorations, wreaths on doors, the faint sound of carols in the distance. Families together safe, warm, while I drifted alone like a ghost. A car passed its headlights blinding for a second, and I raised my hand desperately, but it sped on. The shame surged hotter than the cold. What would I even say if someone stopped? that my own father had locked me out for refusing to fund my sister's wedding. Who would believe such cruelty? I sank to the curb, my breath ragged, my arms wrapped tight around me. For a terrifying moment, I thought of giving up, of letting the snow cover me until everything stopped hurting. But then a face came to mind. Ethan. My childhood friend, the boy next door who had grown into a man who always asked how I was really doing, not just the surface answer. He had been away at college but recently returned to work at the local paper. He was the only one who ever noticed when Melissa's cruelty went too far, who once told me quietly, "Rachel, you deserve better than the way they treat you." My heart pounded with a fragile thread of hope. If I could just reach him, maybe I would not be alone in this nightmare. My legs moved again, weak but driven, carrying me toward the street where he lived. The snow numbed me each step a battle, but the thought of Ethan's steady gaze kept me going. The world tilted, my vision fading, but I forced myself forward until my knees buckled near his driveway. The next thing I knew, a door burst open and his voice cut through the storm. "Rachel! Oh my God!" Arms lifted me strong and steady, carrying me inside where heat wrapped around me like a miracle. He wrapped me in blankets, his face pale with worry. What happened? I tried to answer, but only a broken sob came out. His eyes darkened as he pieced it together. "They did this to you, did they not?" I nodded, tears spilling. He shook his head in disbelief, anger tightening his jaw. "You are safe now," he said firmly, his hand gripping mine. For the first time that night, I believed it. As I sat trembling by his fireplace, a fragile spark lit within me. They had thrown me out to break me, but in the warmth of Ethan's living room, I felt something stir. Not just survival, but defiance. My father had underestimated me. This was not the end. This was the beginning. The next morning, I woke on Ethan's couch, still wrapped in blankets, my body aching, but my mind sharper than it had been in years. He handed me a mug of tea and sat across from me, waiting patient, as always. I told him everything, my words halting at first, then tumbling out in a flood. He listened, jaw tight, eyes dark with anger. When I finished, he said simply, "Rachel, this is not just family drama. This is abuse, and you need to protect yourself." His words echoed in my chest like a challenge. I nodded, but before I could speak further, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. Ethan had found it in my bag where I had tucked it days earlier. I stared at the caller ID. Mom. Against my better judgment, I answered. Her voice came soft as if she were soothing a child. "Rachel, you need to calm down. Your father did not mean it. He just lost his temper. Come home and we can fix this." My chest tightened. "He locked me outside in the snow, Mom. He knew what he was doing." Her sigh crackled through the line. "If you just give him the money, this will all be over. You can go back to school later, but Melissa's wedding is only once. Do not ruin this for her." My grip on the phone trembled. She was not hearing me. She was rewriting reality to make it easier for herself. My father's violence had become my fault. My resistance painted as selfishness. That was gaslighting at its cruelest. Ethan leaned closer, his hand steady on my shoulder. I whispered, "Mom, if I give him that money, I lose everything I have worked for." There was a pause, then her voice hardened. "Sometimes sacrifice is what family means." My throat burned as I hung up, shaking. Moments later, a text lit up the screen. From Melissa. "You are destroying us, Rachel. If you loved me, you would not be so selfish. Imagine how humiliating it will be if I cannot have the wedding I deserve." I stared at the words, fury mixing with grief. My sister had always been cruel, but now she wielded guilt like a weapon. Before I could reply, another message came, this time from Dad's email. It was short and sharp. "If you do not give us the money, you are no longer my daughter." I dropped the phone into my lap, my chest hollow. Ethan picked it up, reading quickly, his eyes blazing. "Rachel, this is manipulation. They are twisting everything to make you the villain. Do not believe it." His certainty steadied me, but the pain was still there. For 20 years, I had chased scraps of approval, hoping that if I worked hard enough, obeyed enough, maybe one day they would see me. Now they were erasing me completely. The despair nearly swallowed me, but another feeling rose alongside it. Anger. Not the kind that consumes, but the kind that clarifies. They wanted me to question my reality, to doubt my memory of the night before, to believe that I was at fault. But the sting on my cheek from his hand, the numbness in my feet from the snow, those were truths they could not rewrite. Ethan leaned forward, his voice calm but fierce. You have to stop thinking like their daughter and start thinking like yourself. You are Rachel Anderson, and you have a right to a life without their control. His words cracked something open inside me. I realized that the lockout was not just punishment. It was a test. They thought I would cave, hand over the money, crawl back with apologies. But I would not. Not this time. Still, the weight of their voices pressed down on me. My mother's sighs, Melissa's accusations, my father's threats. They were ghosts clinging to my skin. I pressed my hands to my ears, whispering, I will not listen. Ethan gently pulled my hands away. Do not fight this alone, he said. Let me help you. Let someone help you. His words planted a seed of resolve. For the first time, I saw clearly gaslighting only worked if I stayed silent. If I spoke, if I showed the truth, the power shifted. And deep inside, a thought grew sharper. If my father thought his reputation was unshakable, if Melissa believed her image as the perfect bride was untouchable, they were both wrong. I would show them, not by shouting in the kitchen or pleading at the locked door, but by turning their own arrogance against them. The turning point came 2 nights later when I sat at Ethan's kitchen table with a notebook open and my phone buzzing with unread messages from my family. Every text was another demand, another attempt to bend me back under their control. My father's words echoed in my head. You are no longer my daughter, but instead of breaking me, it hardened something inside. Ethan leaned across the table, his laptop glowing with open tabs, his voice steady. We need to think strategically. You cannot just survive this. You need to fight it. I swallowed hard, my hands trembling, but my heart sharpening. He was right. Crying in the snow had been my lowest point, but now I needed to rise. We began by gathering evidence. Ethan replayed the footage from his neighbor's security camera. The video showed everything: my father dragging me to the door, shoving me outside the door, slamming shut while snow swirled around me. My breath caught in my chest as I watched the humiliation. Raw, but Ethan's voice was firm. This is power, Rachel. This is proof. We saved copies, backed them up, secured them on drives so nothing could be erased. Next came the emails. I scrolled through my inbox, each line like a dagger. If you do not give us the money, you are nothing. You ruined your sister's joy. You are selfish. Ethan helped me organize them by date, labeling them clearly, creating a timeline of intimidation. My phone held texts from Melissa dripping with entitlement. Imagine the shame if I cannot walk down the aisle in the wedding I deserve. These too became evidence. Ethan typed quickly, creating folders, his focus sharp. You need a lawyer, he said. Someone who will not just listen, but fight. My stomach twisted. Lawyers cost money. Ethan shook his head. There are advocates who take cases like this. Trust me. That is when we found her attorney, Susan Parker, a woman known in our county for handling domestic abuse cases with iron will. I sat in her office the next day. My hands clenched, my voice shaking as I explained. She listened, her eyes fierce but kind. When I finished, she leaned forward. Rachel, what your father did was unlawful. Locking you out in the snow, threatening you for money, these are not family disputes. These are violations. You have the right to press charges. My pulse raced. Part of me still hesitated. He is my father, I whispered. Her expression did not soften. He is a man who endangered you. Blood does not excuse harm. Her words struck deep, tearing away the last veil of confusion. For so long I had believed family meant surrender, that I had to carry the weight of his authority. But Susan's words showed another truth. I was allowed to protect myself. I was allowed to fight back. That night, Ethan and I built the case with Susan's guidance. We compiled the video, the messages, the testimonies of neighbors who had seen me standing outside, shivering. Each piece was another brick in the wall I was building against him. Yet it was not just about legal defense. I felt a hunger for something larger. Exposure. My father cared about reputation more than anything. Melissa thrived on image, on being adored. If the world saw what they had done, their power would crumble. I looked at Ethan, my eyes burning with determination. We are not just going to court. We are going public. He smiled grimly. Then let's do it right. For hours, we drafted statements, crafted timelines, gathered contacts in the local press. Ethan's experience in journalism became our weapon. He warned me, once we do this, there is no going back. They will hate you more than ever. I straightened my shoulders, the memory of the snow burning in me. They already hate me for saying no. At least now I will not be silent. For the first time in my life, I felt the shift of power tilt my way. I was not the invisible daughter anymore. I was Rachel Anderson, and I was preparing to turn their cruelty into their undoing. The story broke on a Tuesday morning when Ethan published the article with my permission. The headline was blunt: Father locks daughter outside in snow for refusing to fund sister's wedding. It spread fast, first through the local news site, then through Facebook groups where neighbors commented in disbelief and outrage. My phone lit with messages from classmates, coworkers at the diner, even old friends who had drifted away. Rachel, is this true? Rachel, we support you. My heart raced with equal parts fear and exhilaration. I had lived in silence for so long that speaking out felt like stepping into sunlight after years underground. The response was overwhelming. By the end of the day, the mayor's office announced that a town hall meeting would be held to address community concerns co-hosted by the local church. It was unusual, but the outrage had grown too loud to ignore. My father thrived on the respect of that community, and now he was being dragged into the light. The night of the meeting, I stood outside the hall with Ethan and Attorney Parker. My stomach churned as voices echoed inside dozens of neighbors filling the pews and folding chairs. I clutched the folder of evidence until my knuckles whitened. Ethan touched my arm gently. You are ready. Remember, this is your story. We walked in together. The room fell into a hush as people turned. Some eyes widened in recognition, others narrowed with judgment, but all of them fixed on me. At the front sat my father, stiff in a pressed suit. Melissa at his side in a pale dress, her face streaked with makeup meant to soften her image. My mother sat quietly, hands clasped tight, her eyes darting nervously. The pastor opened with a prayer for truth and justice, then gestured for me to step forward. My legs felt like stone, but I forced them to move, each step echoing louder than the last. I placed the folder on the podium and lifted my gaze. My voice trembled at first, but grew steadier as I spoke. For 20 years, I have been silenced in my own home. 2 weeks ago, my father dragged me outside in freezing snow because I refused to hand over my savings for my sister's wedding. I paused as gasps rippled through the crowd. Some shifted uncomfortably, others whispered. I continued. This is not just about one night. This is about a pattern. A family system where one daughter is favored at all costs and the other is discarded when she refuses to obey. My hands shook as I opened the folder, holding up photographs of bruises on my arms, screenshots of emails and texts, and finally the video clip. Ethan connected the projector. The footage flickered onto the wall. There was my father dragging me toward the door, shoving me into the snow, the door slamming shut as I pounded helplessly. The silence in the room was deafening. My father's jaw clenched. Melissa paled. My mother lowered her head. Then came the murmurs. Neighbors who once admired my father now muttered words like unacceptable, shameful, cruel. My father leapt to his feet. Lies, he shouted. She is exaggerating, twisting everything. He glared at me. You are destroying this family for attention. My voice cut back calm but firm. No, Dad. You destroyed this family when you chose control over love. Melissa stood too, her voice shrill. You are jealous, Rachel. You never wanted me to be happy. I turned to her, my voice steady. I wanted you to earn your happiness, not steal it from mine. Gasps echoed again. Attorney Parker stepped forward, addressing the crowd. What you have seen here is not a misunderstanding. It is abuse of power inside a home that pretended to be perfect. The evidence speaks for itself. The pastor nodded gravely, his eyes sweeping the room. The people will not ignore this. The meeting shifted. Parents stood to express their anger that a man they trusted could treat his own daughter this way. Women from the church spoke of noticing Rachel's quiet sadness for years but never daring to ask. The mayor announced that the case would be formally referred for investigation. My father's face darkened as the walls of his reputation crumbled. He slammed his fist on the chair. "This is slander," he barked, but the crowd was no longer on his side. Ethan leaned close, whispering, "This is it, Rachel. They cannot bury it anymore." For the first time, I felt the power tilt fully. The man who once ruled my life with fear was now cornered, exposed before the very people he had fooled for decades. The fallout from the town hall meeting was immediate and merciless. The following morning, my father's company announced he had been placed on leave pending investigation into his conduct. The man who once strutted through the neighborhood with authority now found his name whispered with disgust. Neighbors who used to greet him with smiles now crossed the street. The shame cut him more deeply than any punishment I could have imagined. Melissa fared no better. The article about the meeting spread online, and her name became tied to entitlement and cruelty. Former friends stopped replying to her messages. Bridesmaids quietly withdrew from her wedding plans, and her social media posts filled with comments like, "How could you allow this, and what kind of sister stands by and watches?" The perfect bride image she had cultivated shattered overnight. She screamed at me in voicemails accusing me of ruining her life, her voice shaking with rage and desperation. But the truth was clear. I had not ruined her. She had stood by while our father punished me, and the world saw it. My mother walked through the grocery store like a ghost, eyes cast down, avoiding the stares and whispers. Women she once prayed beside now turned away. She had chosen silence, and silence had branded her complicit. At home, the tension boiled. Ethan told me that neighbors reported shouting from the house, my father raging at Melissa. Melissa crying that everything was slipping away, my mother begging them to calm down. Their fortress of superiority was crumbling brick by brick. Yet even as their world collapsed, they tried to shift the blame back to me. My father sent me a final message, a voice recording heavy with fury. "You think you have won, Rachel. You think exposing us makes you strong. You are nothing without family. You will regret this." I listened once, then deleted it. For the first time in my life, his words carried no weight. The community had seen the truth. The image of him as a respected man was gone. Ethan showed me articles piling up in local papers, all describing the scandal. The headlines read not about me, but about him, local father exposed for abusing daughter bride's wedding in question. For Melissa, the collapse was public and humiliating. She called Bradley in tears, begging him to stand by her to help salvage the wedding. But Bradley's family had seen the footage, read the articles, and they wanted no part of it. At first, he hesitated, still caught between loyalty and shame, but the pressure mounted. Bradley began to pull away, and Melissa's panic deepened. The night before, what should have been their engagement party, she appeared at Ethan's driveway. I watched from the window as she stood in the snow, mascara running, screaming my name. "Rachel, you have to fix this. You have to tell them it was not that bad." She pounded on the door until Ethan stepped outside, blocking her path. "Enough, Melissa. This is not Rachel's burden." She broke down sobbing, clutching at his sleeve. "If the wedding falls apart, it is because of her. She destroyed me." Ethan's voice was calm, but cutting. "You destroyed yourself by standing with your father." I stayed hidden, listening, my heart torn between old guilt and new strength. For years, I would have rushed out, apologized, tried to mend the rift. Not now. Melissa left that night with nothing but silence from me. Days later, Bradley's family confirmed what everyone expected. They no longer wished to be associated with the Andersons. The engagement party was canceled. Vendors withdrew contracts. The dream wedding evaporated like smoke. My father's voice, once booming with control, now cracked with desperation behind closed doors. He had built his authority on fear and reputation. Both were gone. Melissa, the golden child, now faced whispers and pity instead of admiration. My mother clung to denial, but even she could not hide from the weight of public judgment. Watching their collapse should have filled me with triumph, but instead it left me with something heavier. It was not victory I felt, but release. Their downfall was not my revenge. It was simply the inevitable consequence of years of cruelty laid bare. The legal battle began swiftly after the town hall, guided by attorney Susan Parker's steady hand. She filed for a restraining order on my behalf, citing the video footage, the threatening emails, and the public testimony. Within days, the court granted it. My father was barred from approaching me or contacting me directly. For the first time in my life, I could walk through the streets of our town without the shadow of his presence pressing over me. But Susan was not finished. She pursued charges of endangerment and harassment, determined to make sure his behavior was acknowledged not just socially but legally. Sitting in the courtroom weeks later, I watched my father squirm as evidence played on the screen, the video of him forcing me into the snow, looping in front of the judge. He tried to speak to spin the story as discipline gone too far, but the judge's expression remained hard. The verdict delivered probation, community service, and mandatory counseling along with the permanent restraining order. It was not prison, but it was accountability, and for a man obsessed with his image, it was devastating. Melissa's world crumbled further. The wedding that had been the centerpiece of her identity was officially canceled. But what struck deeper was what came next. Bradley Collins, the man she had dreamed of marrying, stepped forward publicly. The local newspaper printed his words in black and white, and he also posted them on social media where everyone could see. I cannot in good conscience tie my life to a family that treats their own blood with cruelty and humiliation. I will not build a future with Melissa Anderson. I wish her healing, but I will not be part of this cycle. Reading his statement, I felt both shock and grim satisfaction. It was not just a private breakup. It was a declaration that echoed through the community. Melissa had fought to maintain her image as the adored bride, and now the man at the center of her fantasy had rejected her in the most public way possible. She collapsed under the weight of the humiliation, refusing to leave the house, her calls to me alternating between rage and pleading. "Please, Rachel, say something. Tell them it was not as bad as it looked." She begged me to save her, but I had no words left to give her. The public consequences extended beyond our home. My father's company severed ties permanently, issuing a statement condemning his behavior. My mother was asked to step back from her volunteer roles at the church. The Anderson name, once spoken with admiration, now carried a bitter taste. For me, however, doors began to open. A local foundation dedicated to supporting young women in crisis offered me a scholarship to cover the tuition my father had tried to strip from me. Strangers sent letters of encouragement, some even sharing their own stories of survival and resilience. For the first time, I felt seen not as the forgotten daughter, but as a person with worth. Ethan stood by me through every step, his quiet presence reminding me that I was not alone. One night, he said, "You turned their weapons into your strength. Do you realize what you have done?" I thought about it. I had not just survived their cruelty. I had exposed it, forced the world to see it, and in doing so, I had reclaimed the part of myself they tried to erase. The justice system had set boundaries. The community had spoken. Bradley's public rejection had sealed Melissa's fate, and I had walked through it all standing taller than before. But even then, I knew the final chapter had not yet been written. There was still my mother and the choice she would make when faced with the daughter she had failed to protect. A year later, I stood in a different place, both literally and within myself. I had graduated from nursing school with honors, walking across the stage with Ethan cheering from the front row. The scholarship I received after the scandal had carried me through, but it was more than money that had changed my life. It was the knowledge that I had fought for my right to exist as myself. I had not only survived, I had built something new. With Ethan's help, I created a small community project that offered support for victims of family abuse, a safe place to share stories, seek resources, and know they were not alone. We called it the Warmth Project, born from the memory of the night I nearly froze and the fire that saved me. We met in a modest church basement once a week, but the room was always full of voices brave enough to speak. Yet even in that new life, the shadow of my old family lingered. One afternoon, as I closed the door of the community center, I saw her waiting. My mother, Linda, stood nervously by the steps, her hands twisting a handkerchief. Her face looked older, lined with worry, her shoulders smaller than I remembered. "Rachel," she whispered, her eyes shining with tears. "I came to say I am sorry." The words I had longed for and dreaded in equal measure hung in the air. I studied her face, searching for sincerity. She took a shaky breath. "I was weak. I let him control everything. I should have protected you." She reached for my hand, but I stepped back. My heart ached, torn between the love of a child and the scars of a survivor. Part of me wanted to fall into her arms to reclaim the mother I had needed for so long. But another part, the wiser part, knew that forgiveness could not mean surrender. My voice was steady but soft. "Mom, I believe you regret it. I even believe you love me in your way. But hear me clearly. Forgiving you does not mean I will let you hurt me again. If you want to see me, it will be in public places with people I trust around. If I ever feel unsafe, I will walk away. That is the boundary." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "That is harsh." My throat tightened, but I held her gaze. "That is parenting. Something you should have tried with Melissa." She lowered her eyes, silent. For a moment, I almost faltered, almost reached out. But then I remembered the locked door, the snow, the years of silence. I chose strength instead. I walked past her, my head high, my chest heavy but free. She did not follow. That night, I stood outside my apartment as snowflakes drifted down a mirror of the night everything began. This time, I was not cold. This time, I had a key, a home, and a life I had built on my own terms. The memory of my father's voice no longer haunted me. Melissa had disappeared from the public eye, her engagement broken, her reputation stained. My father lived under court orders and whispers of disgrace. My mother lingered in the margins, wanting connection, but bound by the lines I had drawn. I had lost a family, but in truth, I had never truly had one. What I gained was worth far more. I gained freedom, purpose, and a chosen family of people who valued me. As I closed my eyes, the words formed in my mind like a vow. People who hurt you do not deserve endless chances simply because they share your blood. Forgiveness is not a free pass to repeat the same cruelty. Forgiveness is for me, but boundaries are forever. I opened my eyes to the quiet night, the snow falling softly, and I smiled. For the first time, the snow no longer symbolized exile. It symbolized rebirth. My story was not just about what they had done to me. It was about what I chose to become after, and that choice was mine alone.